All right, hello everyone. This is Niko. I'm going to be your host today, and actually I have a really special guest today. He's joining us, Dorothy Gasque from the Washington's 3rd District. Hello, Dorothy. Well, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, so the way that we're going to conduct this interview is I'm going to start with giving you 5 minutes or so to introduce yourself as a person, and actually it will be cool to know what drove you into politics, as you were a Bernie delegate, right?
Yes, I was. It's kind of what at war.
I couldn't hear you for a second. Could you repeat that?
So, well, Bernie is what really got me involved in politics, and it was my experience at war that's forward with this race. I deployed to Iraq as the only woman and another, and I just experienced a.
Hey, we're having trouble with the. Can you try unplug? Would that be an issue to unplug your headphones to see if that makes a difference?
It might be. Hold on. Let me see if it's my speaker.
Okay.
Let me adjust this.
It is like being kind of interrupted. I think it's the connection, possibly. But I've had issues before when I unplug the headphones, and then that helps. I don't know if that.
Does that work better?
Yeah, I can hear you fine right now.
Okay, it's not. I'm not using the headphone speaker, so I have a compression mic, but sometimes it's been weird.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's all right. Yeah, so I played with an all-male combat unit, and I had the experience of leading combat patrols and managing base security and just doing things that women weren't actually allowed to do at the time, but because I got thrown into these roles, and I just got to experience seeing things, how much destruction our foreign policy is doing in the world and how it's not really benefiting us at all. And then I woke up one day and realized my son, we've been at war for his entire life. He was an infant when we 3 when I deployed to Iraq. War shouldn't last a generation. There's something wrong when we are still fighting. Not his role.
So, could you repeat that?
Is it coming? Yeah.
Sorry. So you were in the military, and you realized that we have been in war for all this time, and then what happened?
It was just realizing that like just that almost 17, occupying something like 8 countries at this point, and we are actively engaged in conflict in 13 countries. So in that time period, we are more any safer, we're not any more secure, and we're wasting tons of resources to do it. And so we need people in Congress who are going to start forwarding the issue, to start talking about peace. And the Congress's role to declare war and peace, but they've been abdicating that role to the executive branch since the Korean War. So World War II was the last war that Congress really took a role in. And we just really need to take that power back so that we can start talking about peace. Our children deserve to know it, peace.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get started with, so for now on, I kind of thought it would be cool to have kind of like a quiz format. So what we're gonna do is, I was explaining a little bit earlier, so I'm basically just gonna ask you, the first time is gonna be a question, but then after that is basically just gonna be like random keyword for issues, kind of like education and stuff like that. And then you tell me in about 2 minutes what your platform is and like what your thoughts are on that specific issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll start. I'm gonna have a clock.
Okay.
So I'm gonna start with what being a progressive means to you. So here we go.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a complicated one because there are very many different kinds of progressives. You have your identity progressives and your socioeconomic progressives. But I think just being progressive means to me that you're focused on solutions. You're focused on thinking about the future and what, instead of all the short-term thinking that we have and very reactionary policy making, that we have a long-term vision for what we want America to look like a generation from now, 2 generations from now. Long-term effects of our policy.
All right, you're beating the clock. Okay, so the next one is going to be, let me initiate here with the chronometer. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so the next one I'm going to do is income and wealth inequality. And
so it's really underlying and causing a lot of problems in this country. We have rising rates of homelessness. We have children who are struggling in school because they're not getting properly housed and fed. And we have just a lot of issues, even now with the declining middle class. We've had a declining standard of living in now touching a second generation. So the kids who are now going to be entering into adulthood will be the second generation worse off than their parents. How we address income inequality really comes with what we should have had after the recession, which is investing in infrastructure. We're bringing back the Conservation Corps. You know, we have a federal jobs guarantee, and we have a living wage. So the minimum wage is one that people can actually live on. And that's really kind of where we tackle. And obviously improving our progressive tax structure so that those who benefit the most from the system are the ones who are paying the tax.
Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned a living wage, because that's key, you know? And the thing about that is that it varies a lot. Like, I like the term living wage rather than 5 for 15, because 5 for 15, you know, it varies. You know, maybe in Arkansas, you don't necessarily need $15 as a minimum wage, but there is the case of New York where 15 is actually below what you actually need. So living wage, it gives room for interpretation, I guess, in each state. So actually, in your district, what do you think would be what is the minimum wage right now where you are? Do you know? Exactly?
It's 11 is our minimum wage.
Okay, and do you think that should go up more, or do you think that's decent? Or?
No, not at all. So where I'm at in Vancouver, Washington, a living wage is closer to $21.50 if you kind of average it out. A living wage for a studio apartment's $18 an hour. And then for like a 3-bedroom house, it would be closer to 22, 25.
Okay. All right. Still with me, asking a couple questions afterwards. We still have a little bit of time. Okay. So let's go with the next one about, okay, so education. And I want to make a little bit of an emphasis, and, you know, this is kind of a split question because it's education as in public education versus charter education, as well as like college, like kind of like, I hate using the term free tuition college because we are paying for it in taxes, but still, you know, like the federal funding of student loans or anything. So I just want to make clear like that kind of like distinction. So 1 second, and we'll start now.
Okay, well, that's a lot. So let's see. I don't think charter schools are an effective way to manage our education system. They allow money and things that they're doing to suggest that it even improves.
Wait, sorry, it's cutting off. Like
right
now, I couldn't hear the last like 20 seconds of what you said. I'm sorry.
Well, just just that charters, I mean, there's no evidence that charter schools actually improve our education system, that there's no evidence that they make things better. So I don't believe in charter schools. I do believe in school choice, which I think is where a lot of the argument comes from. Here in Vancouver School District, we have magnet schools. So we have schools of choice where kids can choose a program path that best fits what direction they want to go in with their careers. But we do that through the public education system. And it's due more of how we fund rely on property taxes. We have a very unfair and unbalanced system where the kids who live in wealthy neighborhoods have the best funding, and the kids the one that need the most resources are the ones that get the least. And so that we need to really start talking about how we fund K through 12 and also pre-K, because a lot of the problems here too is that there's not enough accessibility to preschools for parents. And so that we can start a pre-K program starting with kids out at the age of 2 and helping to relieve some of that stress from parents so that they can work and effectively and go to work and be comfortable that their children are getting an education and starting to get prepared for going to school. And as far as post-secondary education, so you talk about tuition-free college, and that's that area that we reduce the cost of education in this country. It is too expensive. But then we're also investing in a shortage of plumbers. We have a shortage of electricians. And overall, we just need to invest more in universities and in technical schools so that we have a broad range of options for people, because not everybody needs to get a 4-year degree.
Yeah, that's actually something that I was discussing earlier, and it's kind of sad because now people kind of look down upon someone whose career doesn't need college, which that's terrible, because we need other jobs that are more technical, but that doesn't mean that they are not good enough or that they are lesser in any way. It's just a different career path. Everyone has their thing that they enjoy doing, so it's just a different perspective on life. Okay, so our next one is on women's rights. So that's also very broad. You can take it into whatever way.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pro women's rights, right? I think equal pay for equal work. I think access to childcare. Right now, that's probably one of the hardest things and women bear the burden of being the primary care provider for their, and then that affects their careers and their earning potential overall. And so making sure that there are resources in place so that working mothers can build careers and ensure their children are being cared for. And just childcare is way too expensive in this country. And then also, I respect a woman's right to choose. I think women should have access to healthcare. And I just think, and it's about time that we get respect for it. And more women in leadership roles. I think that there's definitely an issue in this country with women, both politically and in the private industry.
Yep. Okay, so now next one is healthcare and big pharma. So also, decently broad.
Yeah. Well, solving our healthcare problem, legislation and implementation itself is complex. The solution is pretty simple. It's Medicare for all. We already have a system in place, just expanding it to cover everyone, not just from the age of 65 on up, but from birth to death, that we're covering people, vision. We can do this all for less than what we're paying now and save everybody money. and save our country money. And then we get into big pharma, though. I mean, this is the part that this is what makes it difficult. This is why it's hard to get this push forward. It's because the power that the pharmaceutical lobby and the health insurance lobby have on our politicians. So it's at the top of my platform. It's what we're running on, is getting money out of politics, and in particular passing the American Anti-Corruption Act, which bans lobbyists from being politicians and for them to be able to bundle money to politicians.
Oh, bans lobbyists from, from being.
Yeah. So it just bans lobbyists from being able to contribute, because it creates a huge conflict of interest. If they're there trying to educate, because that's what lobbying is really for. It was always designed for the ability of people to about issues, but that's not what it's being used for now. It's being used for now in order to influence through campaign contributions. And so that's why we're not even having a discussion on how to truly, because the medical insurance industry and the pharmaceutical want that to happen. Because if we give the government the negotiating power to negotiate drug prices, we're reducing drug costs by about 40%.
Yeah, like the fact that just in Canada, like you get the same drugs for so much less money, it's kind of like a wake up call, you know? But yeah. Okay, so you were gonna say something?
No, just agreeing with you.
All right. So next thing would be, then again, pretty broad, but so it's about clean energy and the environment, and it can also go into, you know, as far as indigenous rights when we talk about for example, the No DAPO movement and everything that happened with that. So we can talk about solar energy as well, and clean energy in general, as well as the transition to that, the creation of jobs that you can, you know, have with that transition, and the impact that it would have on indigenous communities if you don't have to take over their land for exploiting it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah. We have been facing a lot of these issues here. We had an oil terminal proposed at our port in Vancouver, and that caused a big rift between labor and environmentalists. And so what I'd like to see issues is that we bring labor together, we bring tribal communities together, and we bring environmentalists to the table to talk about creating this path to getting us off of fossil fuels and investing in the technologies that we need. We really just should be like NASA, kind of developing programs where we're investing in the research and development and then releasing that to the public so that entrepreneurs can take that and develop the products and have the economic growth, create the jobs, and still move us off of fossil fuels. I like Tulsi Gabbard's timeline. I think that it's bold but doable. So that's why I support the Off Fossil Fuel Act. But I think that we have to bring labor and we have to bring the environmentalists and tribal communities into the conversation so that we're all on the same page and we're not fighting, because we all want the same things. And we have to find a solution. We have to do something, because if we do nothing, then we're putting the next generation at risk.
Yeah, and we can't complain, but we can't really rightfully complain if we are being complicit by not doing anything about these things. So I agree with you on that. Okay, let's jump in the next one, which is a little more specific. So private prisons and how that actually also goes into the legalizing of marijuana, for example, or weed, because a lot of prisons lobby to keep it legal because they know that, you know, it's kind of like the influx of profit.
Yeah. I don't think private prisons should exist. I think that they're incentivizing free and fair country. That is not something that we want to happen.
Incentivizing
locking people up, right? So private prisons, the incentive for them, the profit model is to have more people in their beds, right? Is to have more people in prison. And so they do lobby for stricter laws, and they lobby for longer sentences, and they lobby for things like 3 strikes rule so that they can make sure that they're filling those beds. And then they put quotas in so that the state has to pay them extra money if they don't fill those beds up. So it's not a good model for our society, and I think that it should be outlawed. I think it's time to get rid of private prisons in this country.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry, you were not.
Right. So we need to end the war on drugs. We need to decriminalize, fully legalize cannabis for recreational and medical use, and decriminalize other drugs, because drug addictions shouldn't be a criminal problem. It is a health problem and should be handled by the healthcare industry.
Yep. I mean, I was just going to say, I think that private prisons are like inherently immoral. You know, the whole premise of it is, like you said, to lock people up. So of course they would look to incentivize environments in low-income areas for people to be locked up for whatever reasons. So yeah, I agree with you on that too. Okay, so now this is something that you're really an expert on, I think, because this is what you were also from the military, as a veteran. This is okay. So wars for profit, and of course that can go on to different specific areas, but
so war is a racket, and it's Eisenhower.
Yeah, I'm not actually. Well, you're going to bring it up. I was just going to like add to the wars for profit and the military-industrial complex. But you're just going to get into that.
Yeah. So I mean, Eisenhower warned us, right, about the military-industrial complex and allowing them too much power, because again, we talk about what is their profit incentive? How do they make money? If you manufacture missiles, the only way you continue to make money is if we use those missiles. And so we are killing people in the world without really talking about it, without even really understanding who's being targeted, who's dying in these drone strikes, and what effect it's having on our long-term national security. And it's just, it's morally reprehensible that we do this without accountability. Casualties there are. Nobody's really tracking those numbers. We need to get our military industrial complex under wraps. And again, that's why we're fighting for campaign finance reform. It's that these people have a huge amount of influence over our representatives and a huge amount of influence over our government in general. And there are just so many better ways we could be spending. We can do, I mean, to our national security, and that's where we should invest these funds. Like if we're gonna be building and manufacturing and designing tools for the future, then let them be tools that are really beneficial. Like instead of building robots for war, let's build robots for mining asteroids so that we can, expand the resources that we have accessible to us. We've been at war with my son's entire life. We are about to have a new generation of American adulthood that have known no other reality other than America being at war in the Middle East. And it's not getting us anywhere. After a certain point of time, you have to accept that it's not working.
Oh, yeah, sorry, like first for a second. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. But actually, I also want to go a little further on this. Sorry. I want to know what you think about Syria. Actually, I just realized that today there was another chemical attack. Now, I'm actually personally very skeptical when people start, pointing at Assad immediately. There has been proven that at least in one occasion, in one occasion, it was proven that by a local Syrian news agency, it was proven that the chemical attack was actually conducted by one of the rebel forces. And there was another chemical attack that immediately everyone started saying, Assad, 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 just like blind-eyed. And then I actually got really into that one particular incident. And for example, what happened was that there was a Syrian plane which dropped a bomb into a chemical laboratory which was in the rebel area, and then it hit the laboratory and then it exploded. So then that was the chemical attack, which makes me really doubtful of everything, because then that means that there was a rebel chemical laboratory, so that already implies a whole new debate. So I want to know what your stance is on for example, ISIS being funded by Saudi Arabia and Qatar, which is something that we learned from Hillary's hacked emails. But yeah, so what do you think the U.S. should do about Syria?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to listen to Tulsi Gabbard and pass the Stop Arming Terrorists Act, because it is this case, right? We arm the enemy of our enemy, and then they turn around and they use or they use them against civilians. We must look at this not as us coming in as some sort of savior, because it's total chaos and we'll never fix the problem through our actions. But what we need to do is figure out regional solutions. We need to look at the surrounding countries and put the burden on them to try and create some stability in the region. It's not going to do us any good to have more airstrikes and more war in yet another country. And our military just is stretched thin already. I don't think that we can sustain this.
Okay. All right. So our next one is, okay, this one is also, of course, broad, but so it's racial justice. But I wanted it to be, of course, about Black Lives Matter and the criminal justice system, and how Black people are being systematically, that actually goes together with private prisons, what we were saying before, but how they're systematically being targeted. But at the same time, we can also talk about a little bit of immigration, if you want, and from the Mexican border, as well as indigenous rights. You can really take it whatever you want, but I just wanted to give you a couple ground-based suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, minorities in general are more likely to be targeted by police. It's actually Native Americans that are going to unjustly murdered. And then, of course, all the issues going on with Black Lives Matter, with all of these young, particularly African-American men who are murdered by police without due process. That's a huge problem. And this is something that we absolutely have to do something about. We have to get our police to learn some de-escalation and to stop this, because it's a fundamental right in this country that we have a right to due process. It is not the police's job to execute people, and that has been happening far too much. I actually have a personal experience with discrimination in policing. I don't know if you're familiar with the Portland Police, but they've had Oregon Police Department has actually been under investigation from the Department of. They're one of the bad sort of police forces in terms of racial discrimination. My husband, who is Hispanic and Lebanese, was wrongfully arrested in 2009 in Portland. He was charged with trespassing while he was in a public space, and successfully.
Sorry, so he was trespassing in a public area.
Yeah.
And what happened?
So, and the story is actually, it gets pretty bad when you really think about it. So he was out with our roommate at the time, who's white, and they were doing a little bar hopping in Old Town Portland, and they had stopped into kind of like what used to, into like a little kind of alleyway, to plan for where they're going to go next. And the police showed up, and roommate go and arrested my husband. But my husband had like his ACLU Know Your Rights card, and he pulled it out, and he was just like following along with it. And that maybe that frustrated them more, because they basically, they told him, either you can let us search you, or we will have to arrest you. And he just said, well, go ahead and arrest me then. I'm going to give up his, constitutional right to.
So you're powerful. You both know what's going on. Okay.
Yeah. And so and it was just our roommate was pretty mouthy, kind of being a little bit kind of not so nice to the police, and my husband was being very much following along the rule. But he's the one who ended up going to jail that night, even though they were both in the same place. But they refused, even after they handed them their IDs with identical addresses on them, they still just were not going to believe that those two were together. They just had it in their heads that there was some kind of drug deal going on in that alleyway, instead of it just being two guys who stopped.
Of course, yes, the Caesar was the foreign one.
Yeah. So it's just and then ever since then, I've just been the fact that this is not something we're talking more about. I mean, this is a huge problem. This should not happen in America, and our police maybe dealing with real crime instead of bothering two guys in an alleyway.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one is our last issue, but actually after that, I want to touch on something else that I just realized, which is going to be pretty cool. Okay. So our last issue is LGBT rights, and yeah, you can elaborate on whichever you want.
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things that disappoints me, that when the Democrats had control of Congress and they had control of the White House, that they didn't make the LGBTQ community a protected class. So they did their identity, and that's kind of been like one of those things that I just really think, like, why is this still a thing that we're talking about? Because people can still be fired for being gay, and like they can be discriminated against for being transgender. Like, this is not something that should happen in America. This is something that should just be pretty easy. Make them a protected class at the federal level, so that we don't have to deal with trying to fight things like bathroom bills, and really just try and just make it so that they are protected and that they can't be fired for being gay. It shouldn't matter. It just should not matter. It doesn't make them any less human, right? Like, it is not, I don't know. Like, I don't know how much more to say about it. It's just that the Democrats had the power to.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like irrational that we're even having to have this discussion. Like okay, let's make sure that these people are not treated as second-class citizens just because of what they do with their personal life. Like, that doesn't affect absolutely anybody,
no,
right?
No, doesn't affect anybody. It's, you know, and it just, they should have that right to the way that they do. Like, it's not, it doesn't have any effect on the rest of us. It's none of our, it's just to take care of that so that we can move forward and we can stop having to deal with these state by state discrimination that is happening.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting issue because it does align ourselves with the libertarians in the sense that you can do whatever you want in your own house, like type of thing. Mm-hmm. So that's something that we can pull libertarians on our side, meaning, you know, they will obviously agree with that. Like, you can do whatever you want in your own house, not affecting anyone else. Why is the state coming in, or not? In case it's not the state, but that, yeah, why is the, well, actually, in a sense, the state is allowing this discrimination to happen. So in that sense, yeah, it comes together. And then the last thing that I wanted us to mention before we get into our conclusion is I noticed that you are a CFAR candidate. So that is awesome. On top of being a brand new Congress candidate and Justice Democrat candidate. So can you actually talk, and our revolution as well. And plus, actually, I was looking through your endorsements. It's like a long list. So this is just some top ones that I identified. So can you talk about, like, specifically CFAR, and then a bit about brand new Congress and Justice Democrats and how that has have an impact on your campaign?
Yeah. So new. So we haven't even gone through like this week. But it's just, yeah, I mean, it's a contract for American renewal. Why wouldn't we be on board with that? Like, I mean, we talk about we're in economic decline. So we have a declining standard of living in this country. It's time for us to invest in America. Like, we're the wealthiest nation in the world. We can do better.
Yeah, I mean, right now, 77% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. That's a pretty scary number, really.
Yeah, and that number has actually gone up a few years ago. It's now something like 78%. And so we're increasing the amount of people who have less than $1,000 in savings. So they can't handle like just basic things, like they need new tires on their car, or they have to pay for medical expenses, because I mean, I don't know anyone who's got less than $1,000 deductible on their insurance policy. Most people have a much higher deductible. And it's definitely something that we have to do. We really just need to be focused on investing in America and dealing with our declining standard of living. It's just, it just shouldn't happen this way. We are, again, the wealthiest nation in the world. There should be no excuse for this. And as far as I mean, brand new Congress and Justice Democrats, they really provide a lot of support. As a grassroots campaign, have access to things that we would normally have to pay a lot of money for, particularly Justice Democrats. So they get, like, we have access to allow people to phone bank for us remotely and do that through an auto dialer. And they provide us with a lot of help that that other candidates would have to pay consulting firms for, and get us connected to donors and volunteers, and just really kind of help us get more name recognition and run our campaigns. And all of the candidates are just awesome, and the volunteers are really awesome, and the staff, you know, we're all in this together, and we're all fighting the same fight. And it helps too when I'm running, when people ask me, like, so, you know, you're only one person, how can you accomplish that? And I'm like, well, I'm not just one person, but that are running on these same policies, that are running to get this same work done. So and I can point to all these people. I can point to Sarah Smith, Republican Rob. I can point to, like, all of these people, Wendy Bryce, Allison running for Senate in California, Alexandria in New York, Paula Jean, who I just love, in West Virginia, all of our Texas candidates, and just all over the country, these candidates are, and we just all sound alike, even though we hadn't known each other before we became a part of the message forward. It's definitely an honor to be included with them.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, it's kind of like a family. It feels like a progressive political family.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's pretty much everything I wanted to ask you so far. Actually, quick question. I remember a while ago that you were having issues. You were just mentioning access to voter information. You were having issues with your local Democratic Party. Did that get all solved? That you were not.
And so we have access to the basic voter database, and we've had access all along. But we're unlike Sarah Smith, we're not challenged.
Froze for a second.
Oh, sorry. So unlike Sarah Smith, we're challenging a Republican incumbent. So we have access to the basic voter data file, but what we had wanted and what we still haven't gotten is access to the caucus data, because Washington State is a caucus state, and then we took over this district overwhelmingly for Bernie Sanders with 80.8% of the vote. And so there's a lot of information about our donor or our voter base that we just don't have access to. And we are the ones who organized that and made it happen. Did the volunteer work necessary for the party to be able to collect that information. So it sucks that we can't access it. We were quoted that if we $6,000.
So put up again. So if what? And then $6,000?
$26,000 to access the caucus data, and they still haven't worked out an actual funding model that is reasonable. I mean, because they quoted $26,000 because that's what it costs the state, statewide.
Not right.
That's not really how they should be monetizing the data information. And divide that up among all of the candidates if they needed to pay for it. But it just seems so strange that we can't have access to it.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of makes no sense to me that you would even have to pay for information of your own party. It's the goal of the party is to get as many of your members elected. So you would want to help them, all of them, be successful, you know? So it just kind of makes no sense to me that it's even monetized in the first place. That's not where the party should be getting its money from. That's my thoughts. But okay, and then just now when you were saying this, it kind of froze a little bit on when you were talking about Sarah Smith. I think what you were trying to say is that the difference is that Sarah's running against a Democrat and you're running against a Republican?
Yes.
Okay.
So she's having a harder time than we are in getting
of course
information.
Because they're happy with the Democrat, they untouched, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, that's pretty much it. So now you'll have another about 5 minutes to close up and just send a message to the progressives that are watching right now from all across the country, how they can help you, how they definitely find inspiration in you to also run themselves or get more active in their own local elections.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so we've been building this progressive movement for 3 years since for president, and really galvanized the nation to particularly young people to start really getting involved in politics. And we need enforcement. So we need more people to come to get involved, to step up, to run for positions. The election, right? From school board to to Congress, and to take part, like if you want to help us keep reforming the Democratic Party so that we can make it receptive to the working class. I still think it's the best option for progressives to really make big change, is to do it within the Democratic Party. The Democrats and the Republicans work together to protect themselves. So that the best thing we can really do is to try and break that power struggle, and doing about if we can get people to run and win as independents, that's fantastic. But we need to get working class and be receptive to what we need, and to get young people there, because young people are being hit the hardest by this economic decline. It is each year that people graduate from school, there are fewer and fewer job opportunities, and there are fewer and fewer good paying jobs, right? So we have to work together to fight back. And for progressive campaigns, the hard ahead of us is fundraising. It is the most difficult thing for us to be able to do, because while we do have a lot of the people who are giving us a lot of their free time, we still have to do things like pay the rent for our headquarters. We have to pay for printing costs. We have to pay, for some key. I have a lot of people who are volunteering full time for my. Yeah,
no,
have a lot of people.
Yeah. Sorry. No, I was just gonna say, like, as a simple things, it's like paying for gas to go around the district canvassing, like simple things like that, of course.
Yeah, so it's like we don't need millions of dollars, but we do need about $11,000 a month to pay our expenses. And so for our campaign, we have what we call the Pathway Program. It's a little silly. We have a yellow brick wall up here. You can see it. Maybe I can show you guys a little bit right here. With our
yeah.
And those are our monthly donors. We put their names up on the wall. So that's the best thing that people can do to help us out personally. Them our monthly donors, and even if it's only $5 a month, it's $5 more a month that we didn't have before, and that helps us pay for things like gas to get around. That helps us pay our rent, pay for our internet, pay for our heat, and for us just to go to our website, dorothyforcongress.com, click on the contribute button, and sign up to be a monthly donor, and I'll write your name up here on the wall. But
gotta do that.
Yeah. And then also through Justice Democrats, you can hop on the Justice Dialer and do phone banking for us remotely. And if you just want to get more information about that, you can fill out a volunteer form on our website, and then find the progressive candidates and help them out, because we need each other and we need to work together to. The political establishment is going to protect itself against. We need reinforcements, we need the help, and we need people to get engaged and get involved. Yeah, well, again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Hopefully we'll have you again soon sometime. And that's pretty much it for tonight. Thank you so much, everyone also watching. And yeah, bye-bye. Thank you. Bye. Bye.